everybody. It's Laura, and welcome to the class of 74. It's Sunday night, and I'm just putting the episode to bed, and I'll be eager to hear what you think about it. Where we left off, the young people had finally gotten out of Portchester and were on the Whitestone Bridge, and something had happened. In this episode, I kind of recap where we are. And it's pretty good. It runs a lot longer than I thought it would, but sometimes these things just happen. I hope you like it. I hope you have fun, and I will see you on the other side. Season 2, Episode 6, In the Grand Scheme of Things. The Fitzgerald station wagon was stopped in the center lane of the Whitestone Bridge, just where it came down to meet the ground in Queens. 5 cars ahead, a car had broken down, and Greg had gone tearing down between the lanes when he realized the black woman was screaming because her little boy was loose on the bridge. The mother was clutching a baby to her heaving chest, pacing wildly, crying hysterically, and the black man that had been there a second ago with her was now gone. Cars in the left and right lanes were braking, but not stopping, and Cynthia thought for sure the lady with the baby was going to get hit. She glanced back, cracked her door open, and carefully squeezed out, acutely aware the right lane traffic was practically moving under her nose. Like their country squire, this station wagon was almost as wide as the lane. She moved ahead, sidestepping, keeping her hands on the station wagon so she didn't drift. And then she was onto the next car, where a lady looked up at her from down in the passenger seat with exceedingly alarmed eyes. She needed to pluck her eyebrows, Cynthia noticed. She gave her a brief smile before she moved. Ow! The hood of that car was piping hot, but the next car was one of those little Toyota Corolla things that were new, so she thought she'd have more room and could walk straight forward until someone leaned on their horn behind her. Immediately, she flattened her back against the Toyota, and a big fat soda truck rumbled by. So close, Cynthia could have slipped a bottle out of one of its wooden crates. She pressed on. Not so far now. Behind her, the traffic in the center lane was stopped all the way back up to the top of the bridge. She kept sidestepping. The road flattened and spread out down here, and except for signage and a mess of highway in the distance, it was hard to see what was going on. There was no sign of Greg or the black man, which confused her. They were taller than the cars. She should be able to see them. After the lady softly careened into Cynthia upon her arrival, she wailed with a heavy accent, and Cynthia looked and listened very hard until she thought she understood. The men had gone down to the left after her boy, under that sign, Cross Island Parkway South, Eastern Long Island. But she was hysterical now because she was sure she had just seen her son over on the other side, right under that sign. 687 South, Whitestone Expressway, Van Wyck Expressway, New York Airports. Whoosh, whoosh. The lady pointed to the embroidery on the baby's blanket. Rouge. Was she speaking French? You say red? She nodded and grabbed her blouse. Chemise rouge. Cynthia got it finally. The kid had a red shirt on. The lady saw the red shirt go over something down there at the end, and then her boy disappeared. I'll go look for him, Cynthia promised. She turned to the right lane traffic. Because cars were pulling in the center lane in front of them, the cars were starting to move faster. Next, she held a hand up and inched toward the lane Man, this wasn't going well. This was not the Boston Post Road at home. All right, wait, was this guy slowing down? No, this jerk was going to run over her foot. But the next car was slowing down. The driver wasn't happy about her flagging him to stop, and he started honking at her, but he stopped, and she got across, climbed over the metal guardrail, giving everybody a show, she was sure, and then she went under a metal handrail to reach the walkway. She looked up and down. Nothing. She had hoped the boy might be here, cowering somewhere, because that's what she felt like doing with all this noise and exhaust and honking. She hurried down in the direction of the sign where his mother had pointed. They were over land, but still fairly high up. She knew this because she was looking over the roof of a house. How tall was a house? She had no idea. The ceilings at home were around Dad's height plus a yardstick. 9 feet maybe. 2 stories, 30 feet, or was it 40? Oh, who cared? Where was the kid? Find him. She was almost at the big green sign now, but there was still this concrete wall thing next to her. No kid could have gotten over that. No sign of Greg or the man either, just cars and exhaust. She looked back in the direction of the mother and thought how horrible this must be for her. She hurried, jogged a little. She heard a siren. Thank God. Finally, the cement barrier turned into a fence, but there was a pile of broken concrete she'd have to get over to get to it. Yeah, the kid could have moved like a spider over the rock-like stuff. She knew for sure she was giving everybody a show. She was almost to the fence when she slipped and went down hard on her knee. She waited a second. She grabbed the wire fence and pulled herself up. Okay. Down there, on the other side, there was a dirt path that headed down toward the water. The Pottinger boys that she babysat for, they always tried to run toward water whenever they saw it. Maybe this kid was the same. She followed the fence. There was a place ahead he might have gotten through. Another siren sounded. She turned to look, and there was Greg. He was standing on the divider between what was now 8 lanes of traffic. And there was the black guy. She made a circle with her thumb and forefinger, put it between her lips, and blew, making one of her best and shriekiest high-pitched whistles ever. She had begun with 4 fingers, making a V towards her mouth and learning to blow over them like the top of a Coke bottle to get a low, steady whistle. But over time, she had graduated to this one-hander ear killer that everybody hated, but everybody could hear. The sound carried over the traffic to Greg and the black guy, who looked in her direction. She whistled again to make sure they were looking and waved. Greg waved back. She pointed down behind her, over the fence, and motioned for them to come to this side of the bridge. You must look down there. Of course, they couldn't hear her, but she kept pointing. They said something to each other, and Greg jumped down next to the divider and started waving his arms to get drivers to stop. Down further, a cop car had its lights flashing, and an officer was jogging up between the lanes towards Cynthia, talking into a radio. Greg and the black guy reached her side of the highway. The mother saw him go over the fence down there by the sign. There's a dirt path down there that looks like it's headed toward the water. I bet that's where he went, down that path. Wordlessly, Greg and the black guy took off, jogging down the line. They found the end of the fence, went into the bushes, and then disappeared. That must have been the place. Okay, that was it. She bent over, put her hands on her knees to catch her breath. Her one knee was bleeding down into her shoe. A cop came to her, and she repeated her story about the boy disappearing and where they thought he went. He radioed people, and soon another police car with flashing lights was arriving. She looked up to where the broken-down car was. She better go tell the lady she found her husband and sent him where they hoped was the right direction. God, wonder if it wasn't. Wonder if someone had picked the boy up and taken him somewhere. Her knee really hurt. God, I know I've been asking for an awful lot lately. You saved Dad, and I hope you're helping Clay because someone needs to, and I don't know how. And to help Patrick and Mr. and Mrs. Seaton, please help them as a family. And please help Detective Fiducia with all his kids and help him to stay honest and make more money and find out who hurt Clay. And can you try to keep not Fred out of trouble for a while so he can make some friends? She was striding up the walkway during all these prayers. And maybe you could figure out how Evan and Katie don't have to get into really bad trouble either. But please, please let that little boy be all right. God, please. The lady seems nice. And she has the baby, and the baby wants her brother. She saw the lady, still pacing outside the broken-down car, still clutching her baby. The traffic was all stopped now on the bridge, so Cynthia went under the railing and over the guardrail and walked through the cars. They're looking for the boy under the bridge, she told her. I found your husband and my friend Greg, and they are down there following a path toward the water. The police are looking too. She had no idea what Cynthia was saying, but she did seem to understand she had found her husband and that everybody was looking for her son down where she had last seen him. The lady then noticed the blood on her leg, and Cynthia said it was okay, don't worry about it, and shrugged it off. But it was her ankle that was starting to hurt. She thought maybe she had sprained it. And then she remembered, she had twisted it off the side of a rock. There was a man in a car listening to a ball game. She walked over to ask him if he knew what time it was. Yes, 2:00. Okay. First match was 90 minutes in now. She shivered, not because it was cold, but because suddenly she was really, really tired and scared. It must be terrifying to have kids, to worry about them all the time. There was activity down the bridge to the right. She and the mom waited anxiously, looking but not able to see anything. Stay put, Cynthia. Stay right here. Stand guard. Keep this woman safe. She looked again down the lanes. There was a small group coming up the walkway. Suddenly, the woman gave a strangled cry, handed the baby to Cynthia, and went flying across the right-hand lane. A boy in a red shirt was sitting on the shoulders of the black man and holding his arms out towards his mother. The guy brought the kid down to the ground, and he ran to her. She scooped him up and hugged him, and then she put him down on the ground, turned him around to look him over, and then she swatted his behind and wagged her finger at him. Never, never again, Cynthia imagined she was saying. I didn't understand a word he said to me, Greg told Cynthia when they were hiking back to the car. She congratulated him on doing a good deed. And he said no, his really good deed was dodging the police's request that they drive that family to some relative's house in somewhere called St. Albans. I got us out of that so we could at least see the match. Mimi and Annabelle were relieved and really glad to see them again. They had also been drinking beer and needed a bathroom. Greg took a map out of the glove compartment and looked it over. The traffic started to move. Cynthia couldn't find any Kleenex or anything in her purse to wipe the blood and the dirt off her. Annabelle said her mother always had a lipstick and Kleenex in the glove compartment. Mimi looked and she found it. Cynthia lifted the lid off the cooler to wet the Kleenex in the ice water. Boy, that beer looked good. But all she wanted to do was get to the match, or get some lunch, get somewhere. When she tried to dab her scrape, she nearly went through the roof. It stung so much. You have to get that gravel stuff out of it, Annabelle told her, or it's going to get infected. I can't touch it, Cynthia said, twisting a little to look down at her ankle. Cynthia, Annabelle said, it looks like there's a golf ball in your ankle. What happened? Greg suddenly slammed on the brakes, and Cynthia stuck a hand out just in time not to hit the back of the front seat. Sorry, he called. I stepped on a rock and it made my foot go sideways. I need something to put ice on my ankle. Greg, we need a bathroom, Annabelle reminded him. Yeah, Mimi said. And I could use some paper towel, Cynthia said. Look for an Esso station. What's the matter, Mimi said. After all that running around, you need a tiger in your tank? He laughed. Cynthia and Annabelle didn't. Yep, Greg liked Mimi. I need to use the Esso credit card to buy some gas, he explained to her. And then we can all use the bathroom, okay? In dismay, she saw all the dirt on her dress. And was that grease on this part? Had there been grease on the guardrail? Annabelle, look at the back of my dress. How bad is it? Pretty bad, Annabelle said. But the dress is dark blue and it doesn't show so very, very much. We'll see if we can wipe some of it off. Greg was pulling off the expressway now. This wasn't a service area. It was just an Esso gas station, and not a very big one. The service attendant came out, wiping his hands on a rag. On his gray coveralls, the name Biff was embroidered. What do you need? He asked. Who would name their kid Biff? Cynthia wondered. What was a Biff? Fill it up with the extra, please, Greg told him. Annabelle got out of the car and, smoothing her dress, asked where the ladies' room was. And the guy said to wait a sec, he had to get the key for her. He left the pump running in the bank. He left the gas pump running and went inside. He came back out and gave Annabelle the key that was on a steel ring so big it was practically a hula hoop. Guess they had problems holding on to keys, Cynthia figured. Mimi got out of the car, too. Then Greg got out, handed Biff the Esso card, and went inside the filling station to look for the key Biff said was there for the men's room. That key, it turned out, when Greg walked out and held it up for Cynthia to see, had a 2-foot piece of plywood attached to it. What was this gas station? Cynthia felt like she was in the Twilight Zone. And now she was all alone in the car. Biff leaned in through Annabelle's window. Your knee's bleeding, lady, he told her. After a moment, Cynthia said, Did you just call me lady? Uh-huh, he said. He gave her a crooked smile. Why? Ain't you one? Ain't? Did he just say ain't? I'm only 15, she said, which is kind of young to be a lady. Not in Queens, it's not, he said, flashing crooked teeth in a crooked grin. Oh, geez, what was Biff doing? So are you or ain't you a lady? He asked. Who talked like this? Are you or ain't you? She wasn't and wasn't interested. Bub, I know you're a lady, he told her, 'cause you hold your head up high, like you're coming home from church. She wished Greg would come back. And you've got fancy clothes, he told her, like you wore them to church. But 'cause of your fancy car, I figure you're going to the tournament. Did I reckon right? She was still back on aren't you or ain't you? Walk around to my side of this fancy car, she told him, and tell me what you think. Okay, I will. He pushed off the window and moved around the car with pep in his step. After rounding the front end, he saw the damage and looked visibly shaken. Whoever done that should get the chair. That's a sin, that is. This is one beautiful piece of machinery, and whoever did this to it should be shot at dawn by a firing squad with shotguns and pulled apart by horses. Maybe Cynthia was hallucinating. A drug dealer backed into us while he was trying to get away from the cops. She came this close to saying a drug dealer backed into us while we was trying to get away from the cops. I knew it, the filling station guy said. One crime after another. And he's snapping his fingers 1, 2, 3, 4 times. The nozzle clicked, and he walked back around to take it out, screw the gas cap back on, and hung up the hose. Then he grabbed a plastic bottle and sprayed cleaner on the windshield, leaning way over with a blue paper towel to clean it. He smiled through the windshield at her, making her jump. Yikes, get me out of here, she thought. When he was finished with the windshield, he strolled around to stand by Annabelle's window again and looked in. I got a Band-Aid in the station, but that knee looks like it needs a turkey net. A turkey net? What the heck was a turkey net? But she didn't dare ask. You wouldn't happen to have any Bactine, would you? He shook his head. No, sorry. Well, a paper towel would be great. He immediately held out the dirty windshield towel. So, Greg said, clapping his hands once as he arrived back at the car, are we all set? He had washed his face and hands and combed his hair and looked a lot better. Cynthia opened her door to get out. I'll run your card, Biff promised, holding it up and backing towards the building. You didn't leave the key in the John, did you? No, I hung it back up on the hook in the office, Greg told him. He looked down at Cynthia's knee as she came limping around the car. Did you sprain your ankle, too? Sort of. Be back. Gosh, Annabelle said, you're not walking so hot. Cynthia approached. Is it the knee or the golf ball in your ankle? When Cynthia didn't say anything, she asked, how are you going to walk around Forest Hills without looking like Frankenstein? I'm going to be the bride of Frankenstein, Cynthia told her. Mimi was coming out of the bathroom. Biff says I look like a lady after going to church, so I'm going to be fine. Who's Biff? And it's not Sunday, Mimi said. Cynthia went into the bathroom and heard Annabelle whispering to Mimi. No paper towels, of course, but there was some toilet paper. She whizzed, washed her hands and face, and tried to dab the scrape with the damp toilet paper. It was no good. It hurt too much. All she could do was to wipe the blood trail off her leg. The golf ball in her ankle was starting to darken. She bent over to brush her hair upside down and then straightened up. That was a little better. She looked at her nails and washed her hands again. The other three were in the car, all chipper and excited now. Of course they were, because they all looked great. Cynthia got in the car and leaned forward past Annabelle to give Biff a little wave goodbye. She felt bad because he had trying to say tourniquet. Oh, Forest Hills is nice, Mimi said admiringly as they neared the tennis club. Right around here it is, Cynthia said. My brother says this is where all the mothers of the mafia guys live. So there's very little crime. That's why it's so nice. Ooh, I like this, Mimi said as they drove through Station Square. Everybody liked Station Square because it had been built to impress people as they got off the train. The 3-story Tudor buildings were all brick and half-timbered, with leaded windows, red clay tile roofs, steep gables and chimneys. The road was made out of brownstone, and the buildings on 2 sides of the square were connected by this beautiful covered, arched pedestrian bridge, which felt, as they drove under it, like a gateway into privilege. The West Side Tennis Club was only a couple of blocks away. They were surrounded by Tudor houses and manicured lawns. Cynthia was equal parts excited, starving, and hurting. She couldn't believe she had to go into the West Side Tennis Club all beat up and dirty. They turned into Tennis Place, and right there, set back from the road and largely unviewable from the road, was the clubhouse. Their pass allowed them to park here, something very few people were allowed to do. A white-jacketed valet flagged Greg down, looking not too sure about them. Greg pulled over to the entrance of the parking lot and asked Cynthia to pass him his blazer. He took out their tickets and clubhouse passes from the inside pocket and handed them to the valet. His body language completely changed from, "Who the hell do you think you are?" to, "Holy crow, you guys are related to somebody important." He opened Greg's door and held it. While Cynthia was getting out, she saw 2 couples gasping at the damaged side of the wagon. Cynthia leaned toward the others. "They think we're mafia kids back from a shootout," she said, making everybody laugh. Something was off. She knew it was a weekday and there were only 2 finals, no other matches. But there should be more cars, more people. They were walking down the sidewalk to an entrance she bet some people drove right by without ever knowing what it was they were passing. The low structure was tucked under the trees to create a narrow entrance. As soon as they passed through, the cement turned to flagstone, the street noise disappeared, and they were enveloped in grass and trees and manicured shrubs. Ahead was the Tudor-style clubhouse, pale stucco and wood timbers with a clay tile roof and different-sized windows, all with small leaded panes. It's like a fairy tale house. The couples walking ahead of them were extremely well-dressed and spoke very quietly. They were older and were from old money, Cynthia knew, because they may have noticed Mimi's face, but they never looked back at it again. They were polite. They were being sweet. They were being courteous. They were old. Annabelle and Greg and Mimi were definitely the all-stars here. Young, good-looking, and impeccably dressed. How Greg hadn't torn his pants or anything was beyond Cynthia. Meanwhile, Annabelle was still perfection in her suede outfit and matching shoes. "Did you bring a camera?" Cynthia asked her. Annabelle gave her a look. "When I'm wearing an outfit like this, what do you think?" Cynthia was glad. In fact, they should take a picture right now. Cynthia asked one of the older couples if they would oblige, and they did. They stood at the front door posing. Click. An attendant checked their documents again before allowing them through the door. They found themselves at the head of a long hallway. There were stairs leading up on the left, which intrigued Cynthia because they had that off-limits look that automatically made her want to go upstairs to see what was there. All along the staircase were photographs of players, and the wall on the other side of the hall was covered. It appeared to Cynthia that most, if not all, the tennis greats were here. This had to be the Wall of Champions. She'd heard about it, but had never seen it. But she also knew something else about this hall. They made it seem like the U.S. Open had always been here at the Westside Tennis Club. But Kiki's mother at the club, Mrs. Visser, the lady who had picketed the Miss America pageant that time, told her that all 5 tournament events, the women's singles, men's doubles, women's doubles, mixed doubles, had only come together here 3 years ago. The men's singles had started at Newport and the women's a few years later in Philadelphia. Mrs. Visser was from something called the Main Line in Philadelphia, and her mother had been there at the very first women's tennis championship in America at the Philadelphia Cricket Club. And in their den, there was a sketch of Mrs. Visser's grandmother standing with Miss Hansel, champion 1887, which is really cool. They walked down the hall of champions and were met by the maitre d', who was in a white dinner jacket and black tie. He glanced at Greg's club passes, checked something in his book, nodded and smiled. "This way, Mr. Fitzgerald." Greg stepped back and let Mimi lead the girls to the table. There were no young people here, not among the staff, not among the guests. This was sort of disappointing. Discreetly tucked in the corner was a rollaway TV monitor that had the men's match on. Annabelle, looking like $1,000,000, walked across the dining room like a runway model to see what was going on, and all the old men looked at her. But who cared about them? Annabelle didn't. The ladies were taking their time studying Annabelle's outfit and shoes, but discreetly so. To make her grand entrance into the dining room, Cynthia had sucked in her stomach, held a pretend dime in her derriere, threw her shoulders back, and basically killed herself trying to walk without limping. She dropped into her chair, feeling defeated. Across the table, Mimi was smiling at some lady across the dining room, and then she nodded to her. "Who's that?" Craig asked. "Daddy says all rich ladies are friends of Tyler and Beck's, and that's a Tyler and Beck's dress she's wearing. So in a way, she's my friend." That must be nice, Cynthia thought. Why couldn't her father work for an outfit that made something other than bathtubs, toilets, water tanks, and bank vaults? The lady Mimi nodded to returned a faint smile, but now her brow was furrowed slightly as she averted her eyes and apparently asked if anyone at her table knew who Mimi was, because in the next moment, all the other 5 diners turned to look at Mimi. Mimi smiled and waved, and then toasted them with her water glass. So 2 men at that table raised their glasses to Mimi. Cynthia laughed because Greg's ears were turning scarlet, and she thought, well, if he did like Mimi, he better get used to stuff like this, because Mimi didn't react to things like most kids did. Annabelle came sauntering back to report they were in the 4th set, that Stan Smith, the guy who was in the Army, had lost the first set, but then won the next 2, and this set was going to be close. Cynthia ordered the salmon on the guarantee from the waiter she would have time to eat it before their match. The waiter promised she would. Her ankle was throbbing, and she could feel the skin on her knee tightening like a torture device. She asked if anyone had any aspirin, and no one did. They ate in quiet elegance, with an eye on the tennis match. All voices were hushed. Another group came in and sat down at a table, and Cynthia guessed they were all freeloaders like themselves, who knew high-class people who had better things to do today, like go to work. None of these people worked. They were using canes, practically. They were all so old. Elegantly so, mind you. But still, where were all the celebrities they thought they were going to see? Cynthia excused herself to look for aspirin. There were those inviting stairs again. But before Cynthia could go up them, which she wasn't even sure she could do now her ankle was so bad, a fair-haired woman was coming down them. She was wearing a dress and flat shoes and had a CBS press tag around her neck. Cynthia stopped. It was the English player, Anne Hayden-Jones. And for a minute she was a little tongue-tied when the tennis champ, who was the daughter of a tennis champ, smiled at Cynthia. She said, "I hope you're the commentator for the women's match, Ms. Hayden-Jones." Did she get that right, Ms.? Is that what she's supposed to say? "Mr. Collier is the commentator," she said. "Oh, right, I know, but will you be able to say what you really think? Because you're a tennis great, and we can all learn a lot from you." Ugh, she sounded like Rebecca of Sunnybrook Idiot Farm. But Anne Hayden-Jones, the tennis player, apparently liked it. "Thank you. And what's your name?" "Cynthia Schuyler." She stuck out her hand, and Ms. Hayden-Jones shook it. "So, Cynthia, do you play?" She was trying to move along the hallway, but when Cynthia tried, she had to stop, winced. Hayden-Jones looked down and saw Cynthia's knee. "You fell? But how did you—" "Oh, I wasn't playing tennis," Cynthia said quickly. "I was chasing a little boy on the Whitestone Bridge, and I had to climb over a rock pile to see where he went." "Cynthia," Greg called, his head popping around the corner. "We need to get moving." "Oh," she said, waving him over. "Miss Hayden-Jones, may I present to you my good friend, Gregory Fitzgerald." "Wow," Greg said, surprised and blushing a little. "I'm a fan. Are you covering the match today with Mr. Collier?" "I don't think the coverage will be live today, unfortunately. But I must fly to the stadium now." Greg stepped out of her way and bowed slightly. "Bye. Good luck," Cynthia said. Cynthia floated back to the table. "Guess who we just met? Anne Hayden-Jones." Annabelle gave a little shudder of excitement and said, "Oh, how cool," while Mimi said, "Who?" They exited the clubhouse to begin the long walk past the grass court after grass court after grass court to the stadium on the other side of the club. Cynthia's leg was hurting, and she said if Greg would give her her stadium ticket, they could just walk ahead and she'd meet them there. It was going to take her a bit. Loyally, Annabelle offered to walk with her, really slow, but Cynthia said, "No way, go on, show off that outfit. Maybe some of those college guys working at the stadium this summer hadn't gone back to school yet." Well, that did it. Off the three went. Cynthia wasn't used to this, not being able to walk normally, or walk at all. Now it really was the ankle. Or was it her foot? What she wouldn't give for one of those old people's canes, or even a tennis racket to put some weight on. And then she visualized herself with a tennis racket strapped to her leg, like she'd been shot in World War II or something, and meeting Chrissy Everett on the walk. That scene made her smile a little. But Chrissy was long gone. They were all long gone, the celebrities. She did want to see the match, but she also sort of wished she was on her way home. All that cold beer in the car, that would make her feel better. A solitary figure in tennis whites was walking toward her, wet from head to toe, with a towel over his shoulder. She froze. It was Jan Codes. Behind him was a man carrying a trophy. Uh-oh, it was the runners-up trophy. And another was carrying a gym bag and tennis rackets. Codes was in no mood for talking. He was upset. Wow, so he ended up losing. Well, good for the United States, she thought. The poor Stan Smith was still in the Army, and the Army said he couldn't keep his prize money. Oh, poor Stan Smith, nothing. He'd just won the U.S. Open. He'd make heaps of money. He showed her ticket to an attendant and limped under the ancient stone arches of the stadium seating, and with the breezes, it almost felt cold. It had been so hot for so long. It was sort of weird to feel cool. People were talking about the sudden death ending to the match, how spectacular it had been. As she made her way to her seat, every person who looked at her ticket couldn't have been nicer to her. That made her feel very important. As Mr. Gagliardi would say, a real Queen of Sheba. She tried not to limp so much in case someone was wondering who she was, because the seats they had were so... Wow! She saw Greg and Annabelle and Mimi dead center to the court, only 4 seats back. That's where they were sitting? The last attendant could see she was having trouble on the stairs. Oh, this was so embarrassing. He offered his arm. She accepted. She had to. And this guy was at least under 40 and very good looking. But then Cynthia caught an old lady out of the corner of her eye who was practically skipping down the cement stairs parallel to hers. Brother. She was soundly welcomed in the box by her friends, handed a program and a soda. She sat down and vowed to never move again. But then Billie Jean King and Rosie Casals came out, and she was the first one on her feet to applaud them. But when she started listing badly to the right, she felt for her seat behind her and sat down again. She saw how many empty seats there were and thought what a shame that was. Why didn't people give their tickets to people? Well, kids had to go to school, and no one had known how late this match was going to start. It was 4 o'clock. Annabelle said they talked to a CBS camera guy who said they should have come to the men's final because there were so many empty seats. Oh, rats, Cynthia thought. That would have been so great. Both finals and a leisurely day. Yeah, well, she still had this sprained ankle and a skinned knee. But she was here. And she smiled when she realized Annabelle was angling herself for the TV cameras. But Anne didn't think there would be live coverage. Well, who cared? She was here, and so were 2 of the greatest women athletes in the world, 40 feet from her. Unfortunately, it wasn't much of a match. Rosie's head was elsewhere, and there were just too many unforced errors. But then, Billie Jean never looked better. Billie Jean King was a lot better looking in person, softer than on TV. It must have been horrible to have the crowds rooting against her when she played Chrissy. And Cynthia had been one of them. She felt guilty. And someone has played so hard for so long and single-handedly, her mother always said, tried to raise the sport of women's tennis in the eyes of the public. To make it more popular, she always deserved respect and a well done whenever she played. That's why she had jumped up when Billie Jean and Rosie came out, because they deserved her respect and admiration. They would always be champions. And while she might root again for Chrissy, seeing as she was her age, she would never root against Billie Jean or Rosie or her new friend Anne. In fact, Cynthia didn't think she would ever root against any woman ever again because they had to work so much harder for so much less money. Well, maybe Marianne Corbett. They stayed for the award ceremony, and her friends were sweet, helping her back to the clubhouse. The place was deserted by the time they got there, and they wanted to get on the road. They all used the restroom and were making their way down the Wall of Champions when Cynthia heard Ann Jones's voice. She followed the sound into a bar area. There was a CBS guy holding a camera on his shoulder, and there was Billie Jean King In a chair, a woman was putting a microphone on her. And there was her friend Anne. Cynthia nearly screamed in pain when she pivoted and ran to get the others. Come on, she urged them. Get your camera out, Annabelle, come on. They followed Cynthia and tiptoed behind the cameraman in the bar to watch the interview. Was this the coolest thing ever or what? When the interview was over and the women were taking off their microphones, Anne said, "Did you guys want to take a picture with me and Billie Jean?" Oh, they did. The woman assistant took 3 pictures to make sure they got one. Billie Jean and Anne sitting, and Annabelle, Cynthia, Mimi, and Greg standing behind them, arms around each other's waist. They screamed and shouted all the way back to Brighton. Oh, yay, team! I love it when nice things happen after people have had a hard day. I want to thank you very much for joining me today. Got to go back to school because we got lots going on, lots coming up. Also, a reminder, we have the Patreon Club. And for $5 a month, that's right, you too can come into the clubhouse and hang out on our Wednesday meeting, which is, well, it's interesting. We're not taping it or anything. People sort of sit around and talk about high school, and I take notes. So I'm getting lots of good stuff. And you get access to all my notes to every episode. So this episode, there's going to be a lot about the history of Forest Hills, not the gas station in Queens. That's it. I want you guys to have a fabulous week. I want you to be well, be safe, and remember, we don't drink and drive anymore, ever, but we do have fun, and I want you to come back and have fun with us. See you next week. Bye-bye.